Starting off this countdown, we have the dismemberment. On April 23rd, 1994, a park worker at Inokashira Park in Tokyo discovered 24 pieces of human body parts in a trash can at the park. The bag consisted of 2 feet, a right shoulder, an ankle, and flesh and bones. The head and chest were never found. What's odd was that the body parts were precisely cut into 20-centimeter pieces, and they were drained completely of blood. What's sad is that there were signs of internal bleeding in the muscles, meaning that he was probably cut while he was still alive. It was thought that the body belonged to a top-class architect, but his name was never released. They just referred to him by S, and he was a 35-year-old man. Now, no one has been charged for this crime, and the statute of limitations passed in 2009. No one knows why S was targeted and killed. But one theory suggests that maybe his organs were stolen, since his torso was never found. In our 9th spot, we have the manhole murder. On the morning of January 14th, 1997, a manhole in Tama City was overflowing, causing sewage to leak onto the streets. When workers opened the manhole, they found a mannequin floating in the sewage. Except it wasn't a mannequin. It was the body of a woman named Fukiko Yagahashi, a 39-year-old kindergarten teacher who disappeared a year before. Yagahashi disappeared on February 28, 1996. She was last seen at a grocery store around 7 p.m. When she was found, she was in the same clothes that she had disappeared in, except her hair had been cut short. On top of that, her diary was missing, and apparently she didn't go anywhere without it. It was thought to have been destroyed because maybe it pointed out who the killer was. Although the killer wasn't caught, it was thought that maybe the killer was a local man or a friend of hers. But we still truly don't know. Making our way down the list at number 8, we have The Note. On September 2nd, 1994, 27-year-old Mayumi Arashi vanished after leaving her family home in Tokyo, leaving behind her newborn child. On that day, she told her sister Yoko that she was going to meet her friend by the name of B. The next day, she didn't come home. B was contacted, and turns out that she never had plans to meet him in the first place. Then her sister found a note from Mayumi saying that she was really going to meet someone by the name of A. The police never referred to anyone by their full names, it was just a letter. Yoko hired a PA to find A, but he was never found guilty. Now, here's where it gets strange. In 2011, the family did a television interview about Mayumi. In the interview, Mayumi's father had a note in the back of his room on a shelf that said, "Don't believe what Yoko says." Mayumi was never found, and no one knows what truly happened. But looks like her sister might have been involved. In our 7th spot, we have the suicide forest. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Okigahara, aka Japan's suicide forest. This is a huge mystery on its own. Basically, it's the forest that people go to if they want to commit suicide, often by hanging themselves off of a tree limb. But why this particular forest? How did it start? Well, it's theorized that a 1960 book called Kuro Jukai started this concept. In the book, a heartbroken lover goes to the sea of trees to end her life. Other people believe that the forest has some sort of curse that forces people into thinking suicidal thoughts. Either way, it remains one of Japan's greatest and most famous mysteries. Coming in at number 6, we have Junko Kobayashi. On September 9th, 1996, 21-year-old Junko Kobayashi was found dead inside her home. Her home had been almost entirely destroyed by a fire. However, when her body was found, she had been stabbed to death, her arms and legs were bound, and she was wrapped in a blanket. Police had no suspects. Then in September of 2009, another 21-year-old student was killed under similar circumstances. She was stabbed to death and her apartment was burned. Police believe that the cases are connected, but have no idea how or why or who the killer is. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with Miyako Hiraoka. On November 6, 2009, a mushroom collector discovered a woman's decapitated head, torso, left ankle, and thigh bone. Later, the victim was identified as Miyako Hiraoka, a 19-year-old student. She was last seen leaving her job at an ice cream parlor around 9:30 p.m. What's creepy is that leading up to her disappearance and eventual murder, she told her parents she was scared of walking home from work. In fact, she was so scared that she was planning on quitting her job and getting one closer to home. So was she being stalked or followed? We don't know, and not all of her body parts have been found. In our fourth spot, we have the nylon ropes mystery. For this case, nothing truly bad or criminal happened, but it still is very eerie. So back in 1992, Japan had a show called Tentai Night Scoop, which translates to Detective's Night Scoop. For this show, celebrities or the hosts would try to debunk mysteries. People would send them tips on things that they wanted debunked, like paranormal sightings. Now, one episode that aired on March 20th, 1992 was quite odd. The case they were investigating involved nylon ropes. Basically, someone was tying packing ropes to telephone poles, guardrails, and other things in Osaka. What was weird was that no one had ever seen anyone tying these ropes to things. Yet Osaka is a densely populated area, so it's pretty strange that no one saw anything. Now, in this episode, the host followed a trail of the ropes until he reached an alleyway. There in the alleyway, there were hundreds of thousands of ropes tied all over the place. The host and the cameraman started getting uncomfortable and decided to head back. However, when they turned back to go the way that they came, they found that more ropes had been tied up, but no one had been there. The episode ended with them saying that they weren't going to be doing any further reporting on this case. Again, this was very odd because this show never left any mystery unsolved, except this one. It's also said that whenever someone uploads this episode to YouTube, it immediately gets taken down and deleted. So the original episode is very hard, if not impossible, to track down to watch. All that's left are screenshots of it. So yeah, I don't know what's up with this one, but this is a case of something that's so creepy when nothing that scary really happened. In our third spot, we have the ghost ships. Since 2013, weird old wooden boats have been washing up on the coast of northern Japan. What's eerie is that sometimes these boats were empty, but other times they would have corpses or skeletons in them. Hence why it was given the name ghost ships. In 2018 alone, 100 boats washed up. 5 corpses and 2 human heads were found. Although we don't truly know what's going on with these boats, it's thought that they are coming from North Korea. It's theorized that because of the poverty in North Korea, fishermen are fishing further from home and then being killed at sea. Over the years, the amount of boats and bodies washing up in Japan are increasing, and we still don't truly have all the answers. Moving on at number 2, we have the cyanide poisoning. On August 31st, 1998, 58-year-old Ikijiro Nakazawa drank a can of oolong tea with his breakfast. That's when suddenly he went into cardiac arrest. He died less than 2 hours after drinking the beverage. The next day, a grocery store worker discovered that some canned teas looked tampered with. Upon investigating, officers found that the cans had small holes poked into the bottom of them, and they contained 5 grams of cyanide. Nakazawa had died from cyanide poisoning, but the poisoner was never found. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Wednesday Strangler. From 1975 to 1989, several women were murdered in Western Japan. What was weird was that out of the 7 women, 6 disappeared on Wednesdays, either in the evening or night. 5 of the victims died by strangulation, hence why the case was given the name Wednesday Strangler. The other 2 bodies were too decayed to determine the cause of death. Now, 3 of the victims were found together in 1989 near the town of Kitagata. A man was arrested and tried for these murders, but was later found innocent. To this day, the person behind these murders hasn't been caught.
Coming in at number 10 is the Lost Colony of Roanoke. You want to talk about ghosting? It's one thing to have someone you've been seeing to stop messaging you back for whatever reason, but imagine your whole town just disappearing. I mean, that would give you some major abandonment issues. The year was 1585, and Governor John White was going to travel from what would now be North Carolina to England so he could get some more supplies for his people. A very noble journey, but you gotta leave everyone behind, such is the life of a sailor. Well, Mr. White made the trip, and when he got back, everything was gone. Like, the settlement was still there, but the people had all vanished. The strange thing was that there was no sign of invasion or mass murder. It was like the whole colony just got up and left. The only thing left behind was a piece of paper with the word Croton written on it. This leaves a lot to be discovered. Coming in at number 9, we have Brandon Swanson. Back in 2008, the story of a missing man was about to shake a community to its core. It was in Minnesota, and Brandon was driving home from a party. It was thought that he may have been drinking, but whether or not he was actually under the influence is still unknown. He lost control of his car on his way home and crashed into a ditch. Now, he didn't have a lot of options, so he called his parents. He told them where he was, and they went out to go pick him up. They got to the spot where he claimed that he had crashed his car, but Brandon and the car were nowhere to be found. This was all happening while they were on the phone with him, and then out of nowhere, the call cut out, and that was it. A search team was sent out that eventually found the car that was over 20 miles away from the location where he said he had crashed, but even though they found the car, Brandon was never found. Coming in at number 8, we have Where is Jimmy Hoffa? Jimmy Hoffa was a force back in the late 1950s and early 1960s. He made a major push for union workers' rights. He was fighting against massive companies to ensure people in the workforce had better protected wages, work schedules, and benefits. But even though this guy sounds like he was one of the nicest dudes in town, he didn't do all of this squeaky clean. There was a ton of suspicion that Hoffa was deeply involved in organized crime and racking up massive amounts of illegal money. Eventually, the feds came snooping around, and Hoffa was picked up for jury tampering, bribery, and mail fraud. He was sent to prison in 1967 and was supposed to serve 13 years, but he cut a deal, stepped down as president of the union, and was a free man in 1971. Obviously, when you're involved in organized crime and then you cut a deal with the cops, you can agitate some people. And in 1975, Hoffa went missing. It's thought that the mob may have had something to do with his disappearance, but to this day, it's still unknown if he's dead, and if he was killed, where his body is. There was a rumor floating around that it's underneath Giant Stadium. Coming in at number 7, we have Oak Island. There has been a long-standing mystery about Oak Island. Apparently, there's a massive money pit somewhere on the island. There's even an entire show on the Discovery Channel that has been dedicated to finding this treasure, a show that has been running for 7 seasons. I mean, come on, how long does it take you to find a treasure on a little island? They are really milking that one, if you ask me. Now, some people say that the whole thing is just a hoax, just a tale made up by 2 kids who went to the island and wanted to tell something to the townies so they could get them all worked up. But other people swear that this treasure is real, and they dedicate huge chunks of their lives to finding it. Coming at number 6, we have There's Something Wrong with the Water. Back in 2013, a very disturbing discovery was made at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. People at the hotel were complaining that the water had a moldy taste and was coming out a funny color. Someone went up to inspect the water tank, and they found something that probably had a horde of people asking for their money back. There was a body floating around in the tanker. It was later unveiled that it was the body of Elisa Lam. Now, this is where the mystery starts. There was footage of Elisa acting very strange in the hotel, like someone was following her. However, she had a history of bipolar disorder, so this might explain her strange behavior. But no one has been able to find out how she got to the roof of the hotel, got into the tank, and then closed the lid. Coming in at number 5, we have dead black birds. Nothing like 5,000 dead black birds to have everyone feel like the end of the world is right around the corner. I mean, I get why people were spooked by this. Just listen to this story. This is back in 2010. It was New Year's Eve in the town of Beebe, Arkansas. And out of nowhere, 5,000 birds flew into the side of a building, killing themselves. Now, people started to freak out, but the most logical reasoning was that this ominous bird suicide was caused by fireworks. But the next year, the same thing happened, even though fireworks were outlawed in the town. If it makes you feel any better, it was only 200 birds this time. The reasoning for this has never been discovered, which has led people to think that this is a sign of dark times. Coming in at number 4, we have Amelia Earhart. I mean, everyone knows about this mystery, but if for whatever reason you have never heard about this tale, let me fill you in. Amelia Earhart was one of the greatest pilots of her time. She was setting world records in aviation, and she was easily one of the most famous people in America. Flight was something new, and the people who could master it were seen as incredible. She shocked the world as she became the first woman to do a solo trip across the Atlantic Ocean. She wanted to shock the world once again by flying around the world, and this was in 1937. 7. This was more than a test of skill, this was a test of endurance. Well, something went terribly wrong somewhere over the Pacific Ocean and her signal was lost. Since then, no one has been able to get to the bottom of what happened to her. There's a chance that she flew into some storm clouds and her plane was badly damaged and she crashed. But this may be something we never get to the bottom of. Coming in at number 3, we have the Isabella Gardner Museum heist. Now, it's never okay to steal, but you got to admit, this next story is super cool. Back in the 1990s, 2 men pulled off the biggest art heist in history. They went to the Isabella Gardner Museum in Boston, which houses some of the rarest, most expensive art of all time. So you probably think these guys came in like Mission Impossible, came down from the ceiling, used lasers to cut through glass. No, that's not what happened at all. They dressed up as cops. They walked into the museum at night, told the security that they were real cops. The security believed them. They then gathered all the security into one area, pulled guns on them, handcuffed and gagged them, and then the 2 cops went around cutting out paintings and took off with $500 million worth of art. Are you serious? This is absolutely insane. And to this day, no one knows who did it. There are some suspicions that some famous mobsters or Hollywood bigwigs could have something to do with it, but no one can say for sure. In fact, the museum still has a $10 million award out for the return of any of these paintings. Coming in at number 2, we have Area 51. This place was the biggest thing in the news this time last year. Remember before the coronavirus, when it was totally okay to make an event that was supposed to have a grouping of millions of people? Those were simpler times. But the reason that this supposed raid on Area 51 was supposed to happen is because we all have no idea what the hell is going on in there. Everyone suspects that there has to be something in there to do with aliens. There was a whole documentary with Bob Lazar who claims that he used to work at Area 51 and that they are working on tech that can manipulate gravity. This gravity reactor, as Bob calls it, can be a propulsion system for ships that allows them to move faster than science supposedly allows. All of this is insane, but we have no idea if any of these tales are real because they won't let us go in there and snoop around. Just let us have a peek, man. I want to see some aliens. And coming in at number 1, we have Who Shot JFK? I know what the history books have to say, but a lot of people will not accept that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter on that day, or that he was just some deranged man who wanted to kill the president for some unknown reason. A lot of people think there was a second shooter on that day. There's even footage that shows Kennedy getting hit from 2 different angles. How could that happen if there was only one person shooting at him? Some people think that the mob was involved because JFK was cracking down on organized crime. Other people say that it was all the CIA. And to only throw fuel on the fire, Oswald was shot and killed before he could stand trial. It was Jack Rudy who killed him, and he said it was all his idea to assassinate the assassin. But there's so much murky mystery around this, and it is the president getting assassinated. So of course it's going to bring up a lot of questions.
Starting us off at number 10 is Who Put Bella in the Wych Elm. This is one of the most iconic mysteries in UK history, and I've covered it before in a super old video. Back in 1943, 3 boys found the skull of a woman stuffed into the trunk of a wych elm tree. Investigators later located most of the remains inside the tree as well. No leads were really made in the case until the next year when somebody graffitied Who Put Bella in the Wych Elm on a wall in Birmingham. Even then, no definite identification was made of the body, whose name might not have even been Bella. But some theories have arisen, including one claiming that she was a sacrifice used in a satanic ritual. Apparently, one of her arms was left 13 paces away from the rest of her body, which is common in satanic rituals. Other theories include that she was a witch herself, or maybe that she was a German spy. To this day, though, nobody knows who put Bella in the Wych Elm or who Bella even was, if Bella was her name at all. Coming in at number 9 is the Thames torso. In 2001, the torso of a young boy was found in the River Thames. For 10 years, he was unidentified until a key witness came forward with a name. Apparently, this witness lived with the boy in Germany before he was trafficked to the UK. Still, nobody knows who killed him, but his arms and legs and head were expertly cut off, so it's suspected that the perpetrator was someone in the medical field. But at the same time, there are theories that this was also some sort of satanic ritual or a ritual sacrifice of some kind. But I mean, who sacrifices young boys in rivers? Who sacrifices them at all? I don't know. At number 8, we have the murder of Thomas Webb. Now, to preface this, the circumstances surrounding this murder may not seem particularly scary, but it is a very creepy case. He was found dead from a gunshot wound outside of his cottage at College Farm, which of course is not good. But what makes this case spooky is the fact that he literally had a vision of it happening. He had a vision of his own death. He literally told people that he had a premonition that he was going to get shot while having a look around the farm at night. I don't know, you guys, but I don't think I want to have a literal vision of how I'm gonna die. Aren't there like already a million scary movies already detailing that? Am I wrong? Filling our number 7 slot is a Newcastle Halloween murder. Back in 1963, on Halloween night, a woman named Lillian Armstrong was brutally murdered inside her own home. When her sister arrived at her house the next morning and Lillian didn't answer the door, she called the cops, who then arrived to investigate the scene. Lillian was at the bottom of her stairs with a pair of pantyhose tied tightly around her neck, and she had been stabbed no fewer than 28 times. That is a lot of stab wounds, especially for somebody who lived a quiet and private social life. There were no signs of fingerprints, footprints, a murder weapon, forced entry, or even ransacking, so what was the real motive of this murder? Why would anyone kill Lillian Armstrong? Now at number 6 is the Shugborough inscription. The inscription in question was found in the Shugborough Estates in Staffordshire, and nobody has any idea what it means, but it's very clearly not just a random design. Some people believe that it relates back to a secret kept by the guardians of the Holy Grail, the Priory of Sean. Others think naturally that it's something to do with the Illuminati. Other, more boring unbelievers think that it's just a design dedicated to a family member with no deeper meaning, but I'm not buying that last one because it's just boring as hell. Coming in at number 5 is the Beast of Bodmin Moor. The beast is a large cat-like creature which in most places wouldn't seem that suspicious, except whatever cat people thought it was not native to the area, and there were no records of one being set loose either. The fact that it's been around since the late 70s makes scientists reject these theories too, because the climate, breeding possibilities, and food availability would make survival of these cats incredibly unlikely. So what is it? What was the beast? Nobody knows, but what we do know is that since the spotting of these beasts, livestock have been found dead after being mauled by a mysterious creature. At number 4 is Britain's oldest unsolved murder. Dating back to 1914, a market trader and brother of a city councillor was found dead after his head had been bashed in with a fire poker. Nobody knows exactly why he was murdered or who did it, but some suspect that it was a robbery gone wrong because he was known to carry a big bag of gold around with him. That's probably some information you wouldn't want to make public. What is this man doing? He was 72 years old when he died, and the police only had one lead, a guy who was seen prowling around the area that morning, but other than that, it remains a mystery to this day, and probably forever. Filling our number 3 slot is the Highgate Vampire. Apparently, a vampire has been roaming the cemetery since at least the 1960s. I love a good vampire story, as you guys know. I'm very into the whole Twilight thing. I read all the books, watched all the movies multiple times. I'm into it. Now, one night, a man spent the night in the cemetery just for fun because YOLO, and then 2 months later, he wrote into a local newspaper to explain his experience. Apparently, while there, he saw a tall, supernatural, shadowy figure. Other people began writing in as well, saying that they've seen tall, supernatural men in hats, ghostly figures on bicycles, and figures walking around and then disappearing into the water. Another man said that he thought a king vampire of the undead was responsible. He claimed that a nobleman from Romania who practiced dark magic had been brought to England to be buried in the 1700s, but that Satanists had risen his body from the grave, so it looks like YOLO wasn't quite true for that guy. Now at number 2 are the fairy coffins. Way back in 1836, a group of young boys found a stack of mysterious miniature coffins. There were about 17 of them stacked in 3 towers inside of a cave, each of which contained a small wooden figure in handmade clothes. Nobody knows why or how they got there, but some people believe that it was because of witches casting death spells. Others think they represented the victims of murderers Burke and Hare. But to this day, over 180 years later, nobody knows where those coffins came from or those dolls. I'm getting like Tinkerbell vibes, like little fairies like Tinkerbell just being killed and put in these little coffins. And finally, at number 1, we have Jack the Ripper. I think I would have missed a major opportunity if I didn't put him at number 1, to be honest. He was responsible for the deaths of at least 7 women in 1888, but chances are other unsolved murders are connected to him as well. These murders were connected because of the grotesque things done to their bodies, including having their throats slashed, extensive mutilation to their abdomen and genital area, the removal of internal organs, and mutilation to their faces as well. While there were suspects named, the police at the time couldn't agree on any of them, and honestly, I don't think they did a very good job at narrowing them down either. There were over 100 named suspects. I mean, no wonder they couldn't catch him. Can you imagine tracking down, interviewing, and investigating over 100 people? That's like searching for a needle in a haystack. As much as I want this case to get solved in my lifetime, it's also been 130 years, so I don't have high hopes. And that is it for today's video, guys. Unsolved Mysteries. I feel like that's all that's in my head these days. I've been doing so many videos like this, so I feel like I'm just like, unsolved, who murdered this girl? Who kidnapped that boy? Like, there's just so much going on in my head. But then again, there's so much going on in the world right now, so that is the least of anybody's concerns, to be honest.
Right, coming in at number 10, we have the death of Annie Bjorsen. Annie was a 30-year-old Swedish woman who was found washed up on the coast of Prestwick, West Scotland in December 2005. Police ruled the death suicide by self-drowning, but the majority of the people out there who have looked into the case absolutely do not agree. There is some truly weird factors surrounding the last day of her life that simply can't be ignored. For one, Annie lived in Edinburgh and travelled 80 miles to Prestwick Airport where she tried to withdraw cash, but her bank card was declined. She was seen acting suspiciously on airport CCTV, appearing to run across the terminal. She looked distressed and confused. She then made her way to the town, but what happened to her there is unknown. During her autopsy, coroners found bruises on her body that appeared to have been inflicted while she was still alive. After she was found, her hair was cut and thrown away, which really isn't normal practice. Authorities seem reluctant to provide forensic examinations into her death, and when her family logged into her email, they saw that all of her messages had been deleted, as too had her entire 2005 phone records. Family members then themselves started experiencing internet interruptions when they logged onto their own emails, and they were on the receiving end of silent calls. In 2013, Scottish Parliament were presented with 3,000 signatures of those wanting a full and further investigation. Coming into number 9, we have Gilmerton Cove. In the village of Gilmerton, now a suburb of Edinburgh around 4 miles away from the city centre, there is a cottage hiding a pretty big secret. From the outside, the house is unassuming, but inside the cottage is the entrance to a network of tunnels, passageways and chambers that expand underneath the village, and nobody really knows why they're there or indeed who built them. The theories of course do include the occult, the suggestion it could have been a hideaway for witches on trial. Others say it could have been an illegal drinking den. Wilder theories, of course, say murder. A murder passage for murderers. Who knows? Coming into number 8, we have the Lighthouse Keepers. Among the remote Outer Hebrides off the west coast of Scotland, there is an even more remote collection of islands called the Flannan Islands. Now on these islands sits the lighthouse of Eilean Mor. The islands were named after an Irish bishop who built a chapel there, but would famously never stay there at night, fearful of the old Scottish spirits that haunt the lands. The area was so remote and uninhabited at the turn of the 20th century that only the lighthouse keepers lived there. On the frosty Boxing Day night of the year 1900, a ship was arriving to bring a new lighthouse keeper to join the 3 already living there. As they came to shore, they were surprised to see that there was no light coming from the lighthouse. When they went to investigate, they couldn't see any signs of the other lighthouse keepers. They were, however, confronted with a very strange scene. Meals were half eaten in the kitchen, and a chair had been upturned as if the inhabitants had fled very quickly. Dramatically, it also seemed as if the clock in the room had stopped. It was assumed that the other people had been blown off cliffs in a storm and drowned, but their bodies had never been found. It doesn't explain the half-eaten meals as well and the clocks, like what's going on here? Coming in at number 7, we have the Pictish Stones. Stones have been uncovered across Scotland, revealing an ancient civilization called the Picts. Now these people lived in Scotland between 300 and 843 AD. The stones displayed symbols which at first historians and archaeologists alike thought were just simple symbology, but it seems that actually they're an ancient language, a bit like Egyptian hieroglyphics. At the moment we have absolutely no idea what the stones are telling us, but a team of language experts are working on deciphering the code. What it might reveal, we simply don't know. It could be terrifying. Coming into number 6, we have the Unknown Ship. High up in the remote Scottish Highlands is the village of Drumburg. The coastline is rugged but regularly used for fishing. In the 1900s, fishermen found an old sunken ship, although there are no historical records of a ship ever floundering in this area. The wreck is thought to be hundreds of years old, and only a wooden hull and 3 cannons remain. The wreck can't be raised for further examination because researchers are concerned it would disintegrate. As a result, we're simply left to wonder what happened. Coupled with the many reports of ghosts haunting the cliffs of the West Highlands, we can only imagine what perilous end the ship came to. We have a mid-list treat right here, one of the more famous of our mysteries. At number 5, we have our mate, the Loch Ness Monster. This is one of the most enduring Scottish mysteries of them all. How could we fail to mention this one? So the mystery of the Loch Ness Monster has been one of the most famous Scottish urban legends of all time. Everyone around the world has heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Now, Loch Ness is a body of water between Fort William and Inverness in Scotland, and it has long been the site of otherworldly discussion. Before the enduring legend of the Loch Ness Monster began, people thought that the water was home to otherworldly mysteries. Indeed, a monster was sighted in the area in 565 AD. The legend became truly popular in the 1930s with a slew of sightings and, of course, the infamous Sturgeon's photograph of Nessie. In 1938, Nessie was allegedly caught on film, and in 1954 detected by sonar. Over the past 90 years, there have been a vast number of sightings, but of course, there is no irrefutable proof. Nonetheless, people are convinced that there is something living in the lake. Is there a wider mystery here, or is the legend of Nessie just a story made up for the tourists? Coming into number 4, we have Peter Gibb and the Mull Plain mystery. On Christmas Eve of 1975, 55-year-old Peter Gibb and his 32-year-old girlfriend Felicity Granger were dining on the Scottish island of Mull. After dinner, Gibb abruptly decided that he would fly his plane in the dark. Now, this was following a particularly boozy session, so it was somewhat ill-advised. Granger held torches for Gibb as he took off in his Cessna plane. Now, this was against the better advice of his fellow dining partners. Some swear they saw a second person holding a torch with Granger on the runway, although she claims she was the only one there guiding the plane. Gibbs took off, and sadly, he never returned. His body was found 4 months later on a nearby hillside, but it had already been searched for his body in the months prior. The autopsy suggested that he died of exposure to the elements. He wasn't injured, save for a small cut on his leg. His plane was nowhere to be seen, which was really strange indeed, because the way he was found suggested that actually he managed to successfully land the plane rather than crash it. Fast forward 11 years, and a plane matching his description was found in the sea between Mull and mainland Scotland, but this plane had crashed very, very hard. He would likely have died on impact or been seriously injured. And also, it was in the ocean. Gibb didn't have a parachute, so jumping out of the plane would have been a death wish. There are a lot of unanswered questions here, and a number of people absolutely suspect foul play. For now though, it's still a mystery. Coming into number 3, we have Bible John. Scotland had their very own Zodiac-style killer in the 1960s, and we are still none the wiser as to the identity of the murderer today. The killer picked young women between the ages of 25 and 32 at the Barrowland Ballroom in Glasgow, Scotland. The murderer took 3 victims after dancing with them at the ballroom. The final victim, Helen Paddock, had introduced a strange man to her sister, who had claimed to be her dance partner. Now, Bible John got his nickname as Helen's sister Jean said that her companion had been called John, and he cited verses from the Old Testament. He also referred to Glasgow as an adulterous den of iniquity. So, pretty dramatic. He was profiled as being around 5'10", a sharpish dresser with red hair between the ages of 25 to 30. Sadly, he's never been found. Coming into number 2, we have the miniature coffins of Arthur's Seat. It was the summer of 1836 when a group of young lads were out hunting rabbits. A small cave captured their attention and they decided to investigate. However, instead of finding rabbits for supper, they found 17 3.7-inch coffins arranged in rows. Curiosity overtook the boys and they decided to look inside the tiny coffins. Inside they found 17 dressed wooden dolls with open eyes staring back at them. The boys told locals about their findings, and interest in the mysterious tombs grew. From investigation, it seems like the coffins had been placed at different intervals in time over the past few years. The media started calling them the fairy coffins, and rumours as to their purpose went wild. Some people said that they were memorials for murder victims, but the most popular rumour was witchcraft. The Scotsman, the oldest and most famous newspaper in Scotland at the time, wrote, "Our own opinion would be be, had we not some years ago abjured witchcraft and demonology, that there are still some of the weird sisters hovering around the cairn or the windy gowl. They may retain their ancient power to work the spells of death by entombing the likeness of those they wish to destroy. Pretty freaky. To this day, we still don't know who put them there and what purpose they served. Finally, coming in at number 1 of our scary Scottish mysteries, we have the Glasgow effect. Also known as the Riddle of Clyde, the Glasgow effect refers to a baffling mortality rate in the Scottish city. Let me put it this way, average life expectancy in war-torn Iraq is 67 years old, in North Korea it's 71, but in Glasgow city centre it is just 54 years of age. Glasgow has the lowest average death age of the UK and indeed wider Europe. The statistics have often been pegged down to poverty, which increases the likelihood of smoking, drugs and alcohol abuse. However, there are other similar areas of Great Britain with similar levels of poverty, yet people on average are living 15 years longer or more. Now, research is still rendering more questions, and we still aren't sure why people in Glasgow are dying so much younger than people who live in war zones. What's going on?